Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Uncharted Veterinary Podcast. My name is Pirita, and I'm your host today. I am very excited because we are talking about bringing back smoke breaks. Kinda. We're talking about bringing back breaks. Whether people want to smoke on them, that's their own prerogative. But overall, Ron wrote an article that kind of stopped me in my tracks, and it was wonderful because it really attacked the problem around breaks, and it really opened up my eyes to not just the resiliency that we're maybe unintentionally breaking when we don't take breaks, but also how different people are and what their needs are, and how do we actually put that into place in very busy veterinary clinics. We get into a lot of operational, how to, we get a lot into confidence and resilience and why breaks matter. And then we really get down to the nitty gritty, which is like, how do we actually make this happen? What does this look like when emergencies are coming in or when people get upset about people taking breaks? We talk about all of it. And so I hope you guys really enjoy this episode and y'all let us know how we did. Without further ado, let's get into this episode.
And now, the Uncharted Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new kind of episode on the Uncharted Veterinary Podcast because Ron Sosa and I upgraded our podcast studios for those of you watching us on YouTube. Ron, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing great. I'm so excited about these little backgrounds. Like, it's silly as it is. Like, I was so excited to put this together. And there I am, like, yesterday, just like, ooh, I'm going to do this. And ooh, I'm going to do that. Anyway, it's simple, but yet awesome.
I've been so excited about it, mostly because I've been very self-conscious. I don't know if people realize, but like, it is very nerve-wracking to record yourself. And
it really is.
You see all the little things that you do over and over again, or the words that you say a lot, and you get so self-conscious about it. And my lighting has been an issue for a long time. And so shout out to Destin Bays, who was like, hey, you really need to sit in front of your window. And for the longest time, I was self-conscious about this door because it needed a painting. So I was like, you know what? I'm doing it. I'm finally doing it. And then I got a shout out to you because I told you how excited I was about this new office, our new podcast studio. It's my office. It's just a new corner of it. But I told you about it and you were like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do that too because we are supposed to be having coffee. And yes. Oh, cheers to that. And shout out to Tyler Grogan for designing these mugs. But overall, I think it is perfect. I love it. It's such a silly little thing, but it really it gets me so excited. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the new office. Thank you for just being here. I am excited to talk to you specifically about this topic, though, too, because you wrote an article that quite literally stopped me in my tracks when I saw the headline. And the headline was "Bring Back Smoke Breaks." And I was like, oh, interesting. Immediately ran into it. And I thought you brought up such a great point overall. Maybe you could start by that, telling us a little bit about when we say, when you say bring back smoke breaks, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Number one, I need to call out the elephant in the room for anyone who's ever worked for me when I was in practice. They are going to be like, what? Ron would never say that because I was definitely the practice manager that were like, we're getting rid of smoking. Like, we're not smoking on premise. Like, unfortunately, we had to like make people like drive off the property and go wherever they go for their cigarette breaks. And so, but this is really about, for me, it was really looking about what did cigarette breaks do for us, right? And I talked a lot from a neuro-inclusive standpoint about incorporating more breaks for regulation and lots of other reasons. And I started to go down that rabbit hole of like little mini breaks, and smoke breaks kept coming up. And I was like, man, did we do something to take away some resilience by eliminating smoke breaks? And I don't mean smoking itself, although there is some science about like how it can maybe calm you or reduce stress. But I think that the physical act of taking those mini breaks was something we took away, not just in veterinary medicine, but it was in a lot of the work industries out there by trying to de-promote smoking, right? Yeah. They were trying to do the right thing, but I think like taking away those breaks may have inadvertently taken away some of our resilience. And when we start to look at younger generations and why don't they handle resilience as well as we did, it's like, well, we used to be able to just take a cigarette break whenever we wanted without question. So that's where that came from.
It made me think on so many different levels because for one, I felt like we had just gotten breaks in veterinary medicine also, like, so people did take their smoke breaks pretty regularly, but we had just started talking about having lunch breaks and how important it was. And it's almost like we gave up one for the other. So a lot of clinics might have started having lunch breaks, but with, people reducing their smoking, those other kind of breaks went away. And some clinics are probably listening to this and they're like, breaks, what are you talking about? We don't get any. We don't even take our lunch break. And so I think that there is a lot to this from I think you nailed it. Like the younger generations are looking, they're putting up boundaries, they're looking for their mental well-being. They might not be smoking, but they are putting in other coping mechanisms, right? And so just from a viewpoint of where we are as a society, in America at least, we're seeing a decrease in smoking and an increase in those boundaries and trying to get those breaks in place. But I totally saw what you were talking about. If we're not having those breaks, what is that doing to our teams? And what is it doing to our resiliency and partially our psychological safety in a way, right? Because if I ask for a break, I feel bad too, because we don't have it. And so I thought it was really cool. I wanted to ask you something because I think that oftentimes in my veterinary clinic, when I think about breaks and I think about the people that, maybe did take their smoke breaks or other people that did take their 15-minute breaks, but then there was also a few people who just did not. And they felt like if they went on break, then they would fall behind and they would rather leave on
Yeah.
time than take a break. And so I guess from like a headspace standpoint, do you think that a lot of veterinary professionals have confused constant productivity with value?
I think in general, human beings have looked at value through productivity because in a lot of ways we get rewarded for productivity. And
Yeah.
so that's where we place our value. And so, yes, the other thing is, and to your point, I think many employees, many of us, we have to think about that moment of like, okay, if I take a break, how far behind am I going to get? Right.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about that when I was managing a practice, but now when I play, like to say, I play veterinary assistant because I do it twice a month now, and sometimes a little bit more. It's one of those things where I really have to ask myself if I take a 5 minute break and pretend to use the bathroom,
Mhm.
I do have to think about like, oh, I'm going to be behind in getting into the next appointment, or I have
Yeah.
to like not offer to hold a patient for another assistant, or like you have to make that split minute decision about what I'm not going to do. And that feels really selfish, or it feels like I'm not being a team player, or it feels like, ugh, I don't want to be behind. So now I have to go into like a functional freeze, or like continue to have like a high nervous, like that high anxiety nervous system going on. And like, that's not a place where I want to put our profession in, especially with the age of the amount of burnout that we have. And even, not to bring it up, but like we also have a suicide problem. And I think that's part of it is we need to find mechanisms to give back some resiliency to our team.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned resiliency and both in the article and you bring it up here. And maybe you can break it down for us a little bit more, but why do breaks in generally build resiliency instead of weaken it?
Yeah, it was a little bit of what I was saying before and I can speak for me and maybe in broad general terms and not for everyone, but I think for me, it's like, if I go into an appointment, and I love going to an appointment with a Jack Russell Terrier because it's like one of my favorite breeds. And when I walk out of that room or I finish that room, I also have a pretty emotional like response of like, man, my heart dog was a Jack Russell
Oh,
Terrier. And I start to have
yeah.
like you get those little flashbacks. And so in an ideal world, I just need to walk away for a few minutes,
Yeah.
like re-regulate myself from an emotional standpoint, from a nervous system standpoint, and then I can go back right into the next appointment. But if I have to think about, I'm going to be really far behind, now I may be in like a high anxiety or emotional dysregulated moment, and I have to go into the next appointment, and I'm maybe going to mess up a history. Maybe I'm not going to ask the right questions, or maybe I'm not going to be in the right headspace to take the next appointment. Or, maybe I have to fill a medication for a colleague because I'm being a good team player and I might grab the wrong medication. Like that is not the space I want to be in when there's very slim room for error when we're dealing with patients and their medical.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to give that resiliency, to be able to take that, to re-regulate our nervous systems, to re-regulate our emotions. So yeah, I hope that answered your question, but that's for me, that's very much where it
It
is.
does. It does. It does a lot, especially because as somebody who has historically suffered from anxiety in the past, and like thankfully through therapy, I've learned a lot of grounding techniques that help me a lot. What I'm hearing through this is that like if we had that space dedicated to that, it would be a great opportunity to practice those grounding techniques. It also reminds me a lot of what Tyler Grogan talks about, which is the power of the pause, right? And being able to take a moment to just pause. And whether it is the grounding techniques, or whether if you're a person of faith and it's like prayer time, right? Getting those 5 to 10 minutes to really center and ground yourself back into place, then improving your performance, improving your mood, and improving the mood of the entire clinic if you really think about it, right? Like, especially for people who are in leadership or management positions where the culture really does come from the top, and making sure, like, not just we need to make sure our teams are taking the breaks, but I think also as leaders we need to make sure that we're taking breaks, because oftentimes I think that there can be almost like we can set a quiet expectation, you know what I mean, of if I'm not taking my break, or if I'm working through my lunch break, you should also work through your lunch break, and you should also not take a break. And so
Yeah.
I think it's important for the team and for leaders to be able to take this moment to reset. Oftentimes I wonder if this is a confidence issue, if sometimes people are just not confident enough to say, I need a break. I need some space. I need some time. What do you think about that? How much of this is a confidence issue, and what can people do if it is?
Maybe in a confidence issue of being able to confidently understand our bodies, number one, or confidently know what we need. I think about that a lot. Like, how many times have we walked through our workplaces, right? And then you get to finally you get to your lunch break, or even maybe even the end of the day, and you're like, man, I haven't peed all day.
Yeah, that sounds
Or
familiar.
like, I'm really hungry. I haven't even eaten all day. I think we're so disconnected from our bodies that sometimes we don't even recognize when we need something, when we need a break. And being able to be better able to recognize that, right? When I teach our confidence cohort, I teach a little bit about what I call our bodies are the smoke alarm, right? So, like, when a little bit of stress is rising, our body's going to tell us. And if we're disconnected from that, we're going to bypass and ignore the signals. And our brain is really the 5 alarm fire, like, hey, you're in burnout, like, I am done, right? And we're only really listening to those signals once the 5 alarm fire is going off. And so, getting back into our bodies, being able to take those breaks to recognize what's going on inside, being able to recognize that we've got a little bit of anxiety because maybe our heart dog was very much similar to the appointment, or maybe we just really deeply connected with an owner who is just euthanizing their pet. Like, being able to feel that and being okay to feel that, re-regulate ourselves and move forward will be even highly more productive, I think, right?
Yeah.
The point of breaks is to rest and rejuvenate. And if we can do that, we have a higher maintenance of productivity rather than having spikes up and down of productivity and making
Yeah.
mistakes.
I'm so glad you're calling that out in those cohorts, because I think that that's a big piece of this. I actually was really excited that I got to talk to you about this particular situation here, the breaks in general, because something that I think you've mentioned often is how, as a member of the neurodivergent community, right? Like,
Mhm.
you don't like a full 1 hour break. And
Oh,
ever since you told me that, I was like, that's wild. Because in my brain, I always wanted a 2 hour break. I was like, it's like I didn't have enough time in my hour to eat lunch, walk my dog, and get a workout in. And
yeah.
I would have loved a 2 hour break. But you really made me think about some people on my team. And I historically had, team members that, well, I just mentioned it. They wanted to work through lunch. They felt like they would, they wanted to
Mhm.
work through their breaks, and they felt like they would get behind, but also, like, it was hard to get them even for their full hour. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I'm just like, I'm paying you for this. Like, go take your full hour. And so now, after you kind of put some of that information out there, I started thinking, like, maybe that was part of their thing too. I wonder if you could explain that to us. How does this hit differently for the neurodivergent team members, and
Yeah.
how might we be able to support them?
Yeah, I love that you called out the 2 hour break would work better for you, because that's the human variation,
Yeah.
right? There's no one system that's going to work for everyone all of the time. And so, like, for me specifically, if you gave me 6 10 minute breaks, like, I think I could, and I shouldn't say I think, I know I could perform at a much higher productivity level, like on an even keel instead of those spikes up and down, when I take a 1 hour break, and I get to enjoy it. And sometimes like right now, I get a 1 hour break in the clinic I work at on the weekends, and I'll watch a movie, or I'll pace around the parking lot. Like, I have to do something. But the problem is, once I get back into work, like I have a harder time reinitiating on tasks, I have a harder time finding that energy level that I came in with. And so like I have decreased productivity. I also have a decrease in kind of my auditory processing in the sense of when the doctor comes, is like, hey, we're going to do, Rimadyl 75 milligrams a half twice a day, and we're going to do gabapentin 300 milligrams, like, and they spit off all of these orders. I have a harder time retaining that information because of the auditory processing and the energy management it takes to remember all of the things, the cognitive load that it takes to do all of it, and then to remember where things are and whatnot. So it's a whole cascade. It's not just I need a break. This is how I maintain productivity in the practice. And when I think about breaks, like if the goal is rest, rejuvenation to increase productivity, then to me, that's the answer. Give me 10 6-minute breaks or 6 10-minute breaks, whatever. And I will be performing at a very high level consistently throughout the day.
It's so good that you're opening up, the conversation for that. 'Cause I think that there's probably a lot of people who are now sitting here wondering, what would I perform better at? Maybe I would do better if I had 3 20-minute breaks or, 2 1-hour breaks, what have you. So I think we talked a little bit about this already. And I know that some people skip breaks sometimes because we're so busy. Do you ever feel, or do you ever wonder if some of this also comes from a psychological safety standpoint of like, maybe I, as a practice manager, am encouraging breaks, and having them try to have them happen, but somewhere else, the doctors are maybe putting the pressure on them to like, hey, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And so sometimes teams might feel that tension between the doctor and the practice manager, or the just in general not have that psychological safety. And if so, what can we do as leaders to help the doctors and or help the entire team?
I mean, there's no one size fits all answer to this, right? Because all team dynamics are going to be different. The needs of your team are going to be different. And so it takes an individual approach. And I'm going to get controversial here because I apparently put this out on social and it's a little bit of controversial. But my opinion is I think psychological safety needs to be breaking into 2 different arenas. And that's psychological safety and psychological autonomy. And I saw this by a well-respected PhD in psychology on LinkedIn, and I latched onto this idea. And so psychological safety, and if the way I split it up in my brain now is I feel really safe and I'm going to be met with compassion and understanding when I tell you this is where I'm struggling. Hey, I'm really struggling to keep my productivity high. I'm making mistakes. I could really use more frequent lower amount of time breaks, right? Like I can say that, but when it actually happens and I take 6 10-minute breaks, what actually happens in the practice? Am I looked at like, oh, Ron walked away again, or of course he's taking his next break? Like it's no longer safe to be autonomous, right? In saying like, here's how I struggle. And when I show up with the way that in which I need, now I'm not met with that same safety. So I call it psychological safety and psychological autonomy. And I think that's really important. So the same thing goes with the veterinarian who may not understand me when I walk away, or my team may feel less supported. Like I can feel really safe naming the struggle. I don't always feel safe performing the struggle.
Yeah, that is such a great point, because I think that that's a little bit of what I was trying to allude to when we say that, like, sometimes when the practice manager is advocating for it, a lot of times it can be our own reaction, right? And so I think that I wonder if we can maybe break down what are some of those specific things that we maybe as managers do to unintentionally either create those quiet expectations or maybe even make people feel unsafe. So for example, like I know for one thing that comes to mind is that feeling of exasperation when somebody would come by and tell me that they needed a break. And I'd be like, yeah, let me find out. I'd be like, looking back at it, I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have sighed like that. Right. Like you're making me feel a little bit better being like, oh yeah, no, I've totally done that
No,
before.
I think we've all probably been there. We don't like to admit it. I think we have totally all been
I
there,
don't
but you're
love to
right.
admit it, but the truth is when I look back at it, even if I was even if it was as silent as a, yeah, let me find out real quick. Like I know they probably had to have seen it. And I don't really think about
Yeah.
it in the moment, but I'm thinking about it now. And so, you know,
Yeah.
that's one thing that comes to mind. But what other things have you seen or noticed when, maybe we do go and have our teams take a break, or when they ask for one, that we do to unintentionally, either break down that psychological safety and the autonomy, or in the process to even ask for it. But what are some other things that you've seen?
I think that what I have seen on the assistant floor, we'll call it, is I've definitely seen people call it out like, hey, I could really use some help with the blood draw, but we've got a couple people out on a break.
Oh
And it's a
yeah.
little bit of that like passive aggressive tone, where, and I don't know if it's like I could have really used a break, but I don't take them because, I'm a superhero.
Well, I have heard that
Or if
passive
it's,
aggressive tone. Like I have heard that
yeah,
like, well, I don't need to take breaks because I
I
just
don't
sit
need
down and
breaks.
or I've heard like I have heard people say in the past like, I should take up smoking so I could get breaks. This wasn't in vet med, it was
Yeah.
in retail, but still like it
No, I've totally have heard that in vet
yeah.
med.
Okay,
I
well there you
totally
go.
have heard that.
So like what can we say back to when we hear that?
I think we need to be able to respond in a way that redirects that. Like, you know what? Let me help you out because we need to make sure our team is taking breaks. Like, when we hear that, we need to redirect that and then praise somebody for taking that break. That doesn't mean we need to be okay. And I think this is the trap that us leaders can fall into. That doesn't mean it's okay for people to abuse breaks, because I think sometimes that is the first concern as a leader. Well, people are going to abuse this,
Yeah.
right? Like, I can see it being abused, but I always think of it as like, maybe we didn't realize how much people need breaks in our day, because we have a very high emotional field. We have a very high physical field. We have a very high cognitive load field. And I don't think we actually realize how many breaks people may need physically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard the passive aggressive comments. I've definitely have done the sigh myself, or maybe even your colleagues sigh. I'm like, yeah, I'll cover it for you. Or yeah, I'll
Yeah.
take that room for you. Or it's like, yeah. And don't get me wrong, I think that person probably feels it. It's like, yes, I have to take this on. I want to take this on, but this is a little bit high in extra load for me at the moment, and be able to, and the psychological safety of being able to say, no, I can't take your room right now. And for us as a facility to say, you know what, the client could wait 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's really hard for our managers. That's really, really hard for our practice owners, because we want to care, and we do care very much about getting the client seen on time, getting the patients taken care of. As long as everything is triaged, like a client can wait 5 minutes so that we can be at our best.
I agree. And oftentimes we make them wait 5 minutes anyway because we're running behind. So why not this be one of the reasons, right? I think this is such a good conversation, and I really want to dive into these action steps because you're starting to hit on so much of it from a how do we realistically even do this? Like, yeah, this is great. I understand. I see the need for it. I get how it can improve, morale, efficiency as a whole, and all of these things. But realistically, where do we even take the time for it? So I want to get into that. But before I do, would you want to take a break right here?
Yeah, let's take it. Let's take our break.
Awesome. All right. All right. So let's take it right back. We've been talking a lot about why we need to take these breaks in the first place. And I think you made a really good case for taking them. But let's get into the nitty gritty, because realistically, taking breaks, we all want our team to have them. We all want them. And at the end of the day, once we're in the clinic and things are moving fast, before you know it, there's no time to take them. And so I'm wondering here, one of the things we just talked about was how we as leaders unintentionally kind of set either quiet expectations or we reduce the psychological safety around breaks. And we talked about how the team could also do that. Do you have any action items here for the entire team other than in the moment being able to redirect the conversation? Is there anything that we could do preventatively to kind of make sure that we have a culture in which taking breaks is a good thing and we should respect each other's times? Like, how can we do that proactively?
Here's one that I think you'll like, Maria, because we often do a really better job than we have before in onboarding our team and being able to say, hey, how do you want to be appreciated? What kind of treat do you want on your anniversary or your birthday or whatever? Like, how do you want to be treated when we give you something? I think that one of the questions we can add to that onboarding is, what does rest and rejuvenation look like for you to maintain productivity throughout the day? So like for me, I would totally have written like a 10 6-minute breaks or 6 10-minute breaks. Like either one would work for me instead of an hour lunch. But I think we can certainly demonstrate that. We can give people examples, because I probably have never been asked that question before. They probably don't even know. I think number one would be starting to build that in. If that is important to us, build that into the culture of, let's start asking people what a break looks like for them. How do they feel rest and rejuvenated? And how can I support you when we implement that?
I love that. I don't think it has to go so off the rails where it's just like, hey, tell me how you prefer to rest or rejuvenate, you could absolutely give people options. Like if you're willing
Mhm.
to do a full 1 hour break, or maybe 3 20-minute breaks, or maybe you are going to, do a Ron Sosa style and do 6 10-minute breaks. What kind of structure can you try to offer in your practice? And then just give them at least those 3 different options, right? Because at the end of the day, if I am somebody who's going to want my 1 hour lunch break and 2 10-minute breaks, I can choose that. But if I'm somebody that's going to want, maybe 4 20-minute breaks and it all ends up the same, I think it's a good way to keep things somewhat equitable across different people. Because
Mhm.
that's my other question to you is, in a world in which we are accommodating those, individual breaks, you may start to get some people who are chattering, well, Ron takes 6 10-minute breaks. Maybe I should do that instead. Do you give those
Maybe we
people,
should.
I'm like, do you give those people that opportunity? Tell us how do you navigate that conflict that might arise
Yeah.
from people taking different breaks at different times?
It's like the number one question I get asked when I talk about this at a speaking presentation. It's like, well, what if my whole team needs 6 10-minute breaks? I'm like, well, what if they do?
Yeah.
Like, what's so wrong with it? Now, let's restructure how our days look.
Yeah.
Right. And this is sometimes where this is the push pull between what the needs of the business are and what the needs of the employee are, or of your team are. And it might not be a place where I can get 6 10-minute breaks. Like the practice I work at, you know what? I don't get those 6 10-minute breaks. And what they can offer me is what they can offer me. So it's like, oh, I hear that you need more breaks and less time intervals. What we can do is maybe give you 4 15s,
Mhm.
or we can give you whatever, because then I can be able to structure those into our appointment times and make sure that we have coverage for when you're taking that break, right? So there is sometimes, like, to me, if somebody offered me 4 15s over a 1 hour, I would take that in a heartbeat
Yeah.
rather than taking a full hour. So it's okay to not be able to accommodate every single need, but how close to that accommodation can you make
Yeah.
it?
I do want to put a caveat here because there are some laws that will have requirements around lunches, and we're not always in the same country. So just keep in mind that Ron and I are talking
We're
for
in California because
yeah, or
you
in the
guys are
same
special.
state, yeah, within the country. So do always check with your federal and state regulations on what what's the minimum requirement, right? So like from us, it had to have either a paid 20-minute meal break or a half-hour unpaid break. And so it was one or the other for the meal break, and then the 15 minutes. Do a lot of people follow
Mhm.
what you're supposed to? I don't know. That's all on your own, but those are the things that you should check if there is minimum requirements that we need to provide. And I put that out to my teams like, hey, this is the minimum I need from you, right? Like I need at least you to be, away from the work for at least 20 minutes unpaid. That way, you get the minimum. At that point, if you want to do, 3 20-minute breaks, that's something else. So let's talk about the structure here, because I
Mm.
think 6 10-minute breaks does sound kind of scary to people. So
Yeah.
what are some things that we could do to the schedule, or to even kind of handle the clinic's demands as far as clients go, to be able to accommodate these kind of breaks?
I love this. I've been waiting for you to ask me this question because this is a whole podcast topic,
Yeah,
Maria.
yeah. Well, we got
Because
about 20 minutes.
there's a whole podcast topic because, okay, this really changes things systemically. And in my mind, this is where tech utilization comes in,
Mhm.
helping our technicians perform at the top of their license, helping
Yeah.
our assistants perform at the top of their roles, and kennel assistants, if you have kennel assistants, be able to leverage your entire team. AHA's put out a study, I can't even remember what year ago, and there's continuous studies about how when you have a higher technician to doctor ratio, you actually can generate more revenue for your practice,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And now, if we can start increasing the number of team members per doctor, we give that doctor a break, we give each technician a little bit more breaks. And now we're also doing technician utilization, vet assistant utilization. We've got a really well-oiled machine of a practice. And because you've got more people, you can allow more flexibility to be able to give more time and breaks, however they need to be structured.
Yeah.
Or to me, it's all about like giving my doctor that break by having more technicians, giving my technicians the ability to work at the top of their license and feel valued. And then all of that trickles down to being able to have more breaks in the practice.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of too setting yourself up for success, right? So you already know when there's slower times in the business or in the practice. Like if you look at your phone systems, they will tell you when your phones are ringing
Mm.
less. Can you turn over the phones so that a message is playing that says, "Hey, in order to allow, breaks for our teams, we're turning over our phones from 11 to 12. If this is an emergency, let us know by texting this number at so-and-so, right?
Do people still call into practices? I'm
I'm
sure they
calling them
do.
my
But I'm
practice.
like,
But I'm
I
old
just think
school, I
the amount of
guess.
texting that we have nowadays, and the amount of like how a lot of practices out there, you can schedule your appointment right from their app or from their
You
website.
would
Like
think
I
no.
have to, I would. This is where I feel a little bit disconnected from the vet practice
Yes.
sometimes. 'Cause I'm like, do people call anymore? Because I don't want to
Two
call.
millennials on a podcast. We don't like to talk to people, so therefore nobody else talks to people. I think I still hear phones inside the clinics. Whenever I've been in clinics, I'm definitely still hearing phones. I think that it probably heavily depends on your area. Like if you're in a lot of senior living, for example, I'm sure they're using phones more than the app things. And I don't even like saying that because it feels like an assumption around age,
Like,
but
is that?
I
I
don't know.
mean, maybe 20 years ago, I
Those
would
were the
agree with you,
studies at least
Maria.
about 10 years ago, is that the younger
Yeah,
generations
I
are
was
the
like,
ones.
nowadays,
Nowadays, I don't
I
know.
always
I
think
don't
back.
know.
My 99-year-old grandmother, before she passed away, was sitting there on a dating app. So, like,
Okay.
I don't really know
Okay.
how true
But
that
my
is anymore.
70-year-old father-in-law can't seem to figure out how to use his telescope. So I don't know. And
And
anecdotally,
and we've got 20-year-olds who don't know how to use some programs, right?
that's
So,
also
like,
true.
that's probably the same bell curve as our younger
My
generation or older generation,
3-year-old
or maybe slightly altered.
nephew learned how to order things off of Amazon through my sister's phone. Like he was getting like Spider-Man slippers, things like I don't know. But
Yeah.
I do hear you. We're
Hmm,
going off on a tangent now. I'm sorry. Yeah.
totally sorry.
But I think you're right. Either way, even if you do have text messaging and email, and you can set those to away messages and say like, hey, to
Mhm.
accommodate breaks for our team, we're going to be away from, 10 to 11. It's one of those smaller times. It's very rare somebody's going to get upset with you, but you can at least communicate with your clients what you are doing. I think another important piece to this that we haven't really touched on is having a designated space for rest. A lot of clinics
Yeah.
still don't have
Mm.
break rooms, or even if they do, they have a tiny little break room. And I've seen clinics get really creative about this. They'll put up like their, tables outside to create this little outdoor area. I've seen clinics, turn an exam room into the break room into for a certain amount of time, obviously within OSHA regulations and following those standards. But overall, I do think having a designated space, it's the reason why
Yes.
I'm obsessed with the places they have mother rooms, you know what I mean, for nursing
Hmm.
mothers, or the places that
Yeah.
have prayer rooms for people that are like of faith and like want to just go in there and meditate of some sort. Like they, and I love the places that will have little communication booths. Cause sometimes some people, that's how they rest and relax. They go and they talk to a loved one and they get to check in with their
Mhm.
husband or wife or their partner. And so being able to offer that kind of privacy, I think can be huge. Not that you have to go remodel your clinic right away, just trying to give you some ideas
No,
on the
but
space.
please don't build your clinics without a break room, right?
Yeah.
Or a multi-purpose quiet space for your team. We've done so much better for the patients, right? And giving them a quiet room for our euthanasia
Yeah.
appointments. But like if you're building your new practice, like have space for the human beings inside of it. And I think that's really important. Because I still have worked and done relief vet assistant work at practices that don't have break rooms. You tend to have this counter in the back with
Yeah.
a microwave and a fridge, but there's no place to sit. And I even wrote an article about how I sat at the freezer one time where we lay
Yeah.
our patients to rest until they get cremated. And I'm like, I had this realization, and I've done it many times, and realized like how gross it is that we are human beings eating on top of a refrigerator or freezer that houses the remains of our patients is kind of
Yeah.
gross.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a priority if you can make it a priority. Understandably that we all have different spaces. It's hard to do it, but
Absolutely.
definitely get creative if you can. And I love being able to protect the schedule with either staggered coverage, blocks. I'm a big fan of blocks. We forget what a big deal it is to block the tech column, because if we're seeing tech appointments and regular appointments, you're asking a lot of your technicians. But if you can just block the tech columns, if you know that you have a certain amount of team members that like that 10-minute breaks, can you block the tech column? So that way you're not losing productivity on the doctor column, but you are still able to accommodate the schedule one way or the other. And then I'm also a big, big fan of reducing guilt language as a whole. We talked about doing this as in the moment. I think that one of the ways that we do this also is through team agreements. We've done workshops at Uncharted around team agreements, so they're available online for Uncharted members if you want to do it. But overall, like getting together as a whole, as a group, and having the discussion and saying, hey guys, we know that breaks are important. And I don't want you to have to feel guilty or have to feel like you are taking the workload from somebody else taking a break. So what are some of the things that we can do? And then asking the question, how should we respond when somebody perhaps is upset around it, right? And then that way we're creating shared language together around,
Yeah.
I love that we did this at Uncharted because there was one that
I was just going to say, we do this at every Uncharted live conference that we do. We go sit around the table and we say, what does a break look like for you? How can I support you when you go on your break?
yeah, I
Those
think
are the two questions we ask
that's
every single
super
time.
powerful for us and for the team because you're right. Like I'm not normally the kind that even will say like I need a break. I'm the fall on the sword fawning type, right? Like I'll be like, no, we don't
Mhm.
need a break. I'll be fine. Everybody else take a break. I'll survive. But the fact that you ask that really sets that intention right up front of like, no, I should take care of my own break also. And here we are preparing about it, talking about it ahead of
It's a
time.
little bit of positive peer pressure,
Yeah.
right? So it's like when the whole room is like, I need a break. And then I get to Maria and she's like, well, if the rest of the room is
Where I
taking a
guess
break,
it's
I guess I
okay.
should
Yeah.
too.
It's true. It's so true. It's like positive peer pressure. It's like when your neighbors clean up their yard real nice and you're like, you know what?
Yes.
I need to clean up my yard.
Uh-huh.
I like to be the example there. But, like I love when I clean my yard and then they see other ones. It's so nice. But either
Yeah.
way, yes, sometimes I need the example for me. So I love that. I
Mhm.
think that creating that shared language. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So through the team, not only just that when we're talking about conferences and breaks, but through the team agreements at Uncharted, one of the phrases that I love that we built was that I will give as much grace to myself as I give to others, because
Mhm.
oftentimes we talked about how we allow other people more grace, but when we're really hard on ourselves. And I love that I was
Mhm.
able to bring that up later on when somebody was being hard on themselves over a mistake. I'd be able to be like, hey, remember we made this
Yeah.
team agreement that we were going to allow ourselves as much grace as we allow others. And I'd be like, yeah, you're right. But like, it's giving us that shared language so that when somebody does say something like, well, I needed help on this blood draw, but there's nobody around because we're all on breaks, somebody can feel empowered to say, hey, remember we talked about, giving ourselves as much breaks as we would give other people. And so something like that, like maybe
Mhm.
that's not the language, but
Yeah.
overall you have something to say and they feel empowered to say it. So I think that those are all things that I would definitely try and do. Beyond staggered coverage, protected micro breaks, workflows and guilt language and rest spaces. Is there anything else that you can think of from an operational standpoint that would make it more realistic to build a healthier break culture?
Yeah, I think the only other thing, and as controversial as it is in the state of our country, is like I think DE&I should be one of those mandatory, like just like OSHA is, just like the DEA, if you're here in the States, all of those trainings. I really think we need to have shared understanding for marginalized communities in our practices to understand where they're coming from, how they work, because equity is something that a lot is not misunderstood, especially when it's invisible, right? For me, with somebody who's ADHD and autistic, it's you don't always get to see the functional free state or the emotional dysregulated state because I have put the mask on so that you don't get to see that, right? But it doesn't mean I'm not internally dying a little bit just by having to push through. And so for people to understand that 6-10 minute breaks for me gives me the same equity to be able to perform at my highest all day long. For
Yeah.
somebody who can perform at their highest all day long with a 1 hour break, wonderful. This is just giving me the same step, the same little stool to get at the same height as someone else who doesn't have the height, right?
Yeah.
Like when we give our children a little step stool to help us cook, that's an equity thing, right? Like we're now at the same level, be able to do the same task
Yeah.
together.
I love that. I think too, one of the things that stops us here usually from being able to take our breaks is when the unexpected happens, right? And
Mm.
so all of a sudden we've got blocks in place, we got a good culture around breaks, but now we have this emergency laparotomy that's coming in and we got it all hands
Mhm.
on deck. What would you recommend for even those types of situations? Maybe it's not happening all the time, but every so often we've
Yeah.
got something that hits the fan and we're like, all right, our break schedule's way out the door. What do we do now?
Yeah. I think it's important to like all hands on deck are needed, right? Like we need to set those expectations when emergency walks in the door. I think at my practice, we always had like a CPR handoff, right? So if somebody was always in charge of intubation or catheter placement and whatnot, we had like a little expectation. I think that we enact the plan, right? Don't wait for an emergency to happen in order for you to have a plan. So get one early on and then incorporate the breaks, right? Like if I need all hands on deck, we can discuss once things start to slow down and are in a maintenance place where the patient stabilized. So it's like, okay, I get that you missed your break. Do you need one now? How can I help support the rest of the team? And that maybe means the manager and the leaders to step out of their office and like help manage that because they are not thinking about anything else but the patient.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Especially if we do emergency drills, which I'm a big fan of. If you know, put your team through an emergency
Yeah.
drill, pretend that somebody's on break. And like what happens when it's like two people are on break, you need to go get them and figure it out
Mhm.
in order to get all hands on deck and incorporating that way. We did used to have an unspoken, like unwritten policy in my practice where it was unwritten for a reason. But it was unwritten policy in which if we were going to schedule something through break, the clinic had to buy lunch for the entire team. And this was something that we started because my practice owner was
Yep.
like always wanting to schedule things through the lunch break. And he's like, I understand people's breaks are important, but when it comes down to it, I find it really hard to say no to the clients. And then I'm putting them through things that don't necessarily need to be scheduled right through our lunch break. And I'm like, that's okay. Let's make it a little bit harder then, right? And then I was like, what if every time we do that, we're still supporting the team? Because one of the things is that like when that happens, nobody takes a break. But if we're bringing in
Mhm.
food, they don't have to go out and get their food because a lot of them used to, go and get their food. And we can still give them a 20-minute paid break, like 20 minutes away from work, go get your food, go eat,
Mhm.
go sit down and do what you need to do. You don't have to go get your food. And so that way they're getting paid more and they're getting free lunch, right? And so that way it also stops us from like trying to do this every single day because that was our real problem. And that leads me to that. Like if you're booking through your lunch break every single day, this is no longer emergencies.
If you're going to do that, it cannot be pizza. It has to be an expensive
Well, yeah.
lunch, right? So that it pushes you to the point where you really have to ask, am I doing this to the team?
Yes, yes. I forgot to mention the team gets to pick where we get food from. So like if they wanted Olive Garden, we got Olive Garden. If they wanted,
Mhm.
if they wanted pizza, they would get pizza, but we would often like let it be a voting thing because that's really, really important too.
And a drink and
A
dessert
lot of
and a
people,
cookie or a
yeah,
side. Like it's going to
it's gonna
cost you
cost you
to,
to do this. Like
yeah.
you have to. And my practice owner would be like, okay, yeah, deal. So like that's what we did, and that genuinely did help because he would, kind of now he's comparing those costs of, did this really need to get dropped off? Because now it's going to cost me $300 in lunch for the entire team, right? And so like
Mhm.
for us, it worked really well, but and the team really, really enjoyed it to the point where the team was like, I really think we have to fit this one in through lunch. And I mean, I mean, like, I don't think this spay needs to be squeezed in during lunch, but
No.
all right, let's do that something else, right? Let's do that some other day.
Mhm.
But anyway, it was a good way for them to kind of get something out of the situation, remove some of the barriers, and then also try to stop us from doing it every single day, right? Because we don't want to be working through our lunches every day. We need to try and control that. So that's one of mine. How do you balance compassion with fairness when the clinic is slammed and nobody wants to step away? Because you have some bleeding hearts that are like,
Mhm.
yeah, but now
This
I,
is why asking people how they need to take a break and how can I support you comes in. Because
yeah,
when I know Maria doesn't like to take a break, but this is how she likes to take a break, I get to know my people and go, Maria, I think you need to take a break because, and this is how I need to support you, right? Like maybe it's whatever that support language that you asked for early on, I can now pull from and say, hey, remember you told me that you have a harder time taking breaks and this is how I'm going to support you.
yeah.
I'm going to pull you off the floor and you're going to take 5 or you're going to take 10 or whatever that looked like.
I think this is also a good opportunity for me to really think about the communication styles because everyone has a different reason as to why. So like I said, the bleeding
Mm,
heart, right? Who maybe avoids taking breaks because they don't want to burden the team. That's very S coded. And for an S, you want to try and
yeah.
tell them how this will actually benefit the team as a whole because they are taking a
Yeah.
break, right? Where I really need you to lead by example because I think that other people need their breaks also. And so if we can have you, right? And I might want to power through and judge quietly because of the inefficiency. But we might need to show them how
Yeah.
we are more efficient because we take those breaks. An I style is going to need to socially decompress, like my way. Like I'm that person that wants to call my mom on my lunch break or something, because I'm trying to talk to people I want to talk to. And so if that's the case, like being able to give them that social ability, and then the C styles may delay breaks because they feel like things are being left unfinished or because there's more risk involved. And so if we can reassure them that the risk is still mitigated and that we're going to get those things done, that's kind of where those systems come into play. So like if we are going to turn over the phones, if we are going to have somebody cover so that they don't come back to a giant desk full of stuff, we need to let them know that we're doing those things. And so I think that all helps.
And the D, you just tell me what to do and I got it. Good.
He's like, it's fine.
Ron, I need you to take your break now. Great.
Let's go.
I'm out.
Like straight, short, to the point, you know? All right. Well, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for chatting this through with me. Is there anything else you want to tell people?
No, I think this was very comprehensive. So thank you for taking this topic up with me because I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. Well, everyone, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
And that's it. That's all we got for y'all. Thank you so much for joining us with this episode. We had so much fun talking about breaks. I love talking to Ron about this stuff. I mean, he just opens up my mind to so much when it comes to the neurodivergent brain and when it comes to like, how do we understand each other from a different perspective and how do we make things equitable? Like he is so on top of that stuff. And so thank you, Ron, for joining me. Thank you all for listening to this. I hope it was enjoyable. I hope you got some pearls out of it. I hope that it's making your clinics an even better place to work because that's what we're all about at Uncharted. And if you really like this episode, feel free to leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. I never know how to end it. I'm always like, wait, what do I say now?
I know. I have the same problem with my own podcast.
I'm like, oh wait, yeah, I need to wrap it up. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks for cleaning this up.